There are very few video game companies with a reputation like From Software. Only a handful of companies can claim they created and perfected a genre, but their Soulsborne games are truly remarkable. Renowned for their deep and intricate stories, beautifully crafted worlds, and tight and challenging gameplay, Soulsborne games are truly something else. With hit after hit, one would think FromSoft is infallible, yet there is one game in their near-perfect record that many would consider the black sheep of the family. And that game is Dark Souls 2. Marred with developmental issues, this game was released in a less than desirable state and was only semi-fixed with an update months later. Out of all the Soulsborne games, this is the only one to have a mostly negative reception. But why is that? What happened to Dark Souls 2? Founded in 1986, From Software gained recognition for its early titles like King's Field and the Armored Core series. Yet, despite garnering a dedicated fanbase, FromSoft games didn't achieve mainstream success. That is, until Hidetaka Miyazaki entered the picture. Joining From Software in 2004, Miyazaki was initially a designer for the Armored Core series. However, his pivotal role in the company's history came with the development of Demon's Souls in 2009. Initially considered a nothing project and an expected failure by From Software, Miyazaki felt drawn to the project due to the prospects of developing a fantasy action role-playing game. Because of From Software's lack of faith in the project, they allowed Miyazaki to take full control of Demon's Souls. The end result was something no one expected. Demon's Souls was something new. Its gameplay was innovative and challenging, and was set within a deeply interconnected world. The game received critical acclaim for its atmospheric design, intricate level layout, and punishing difficulty that resonated with players seeking a demanding gaming experience. Despite being reviewed negatively at the 2009 Tokyo Game Show and selling far under the projected sales estimates, it began to gain some traction a few months after its release. It was eventually published outside of Japan, where it saw even greater success. Miyazaki's vision played a crucial role in the success of Demon's Souls and marked a massive turning point for From Software. The formula established in Demon's Souls laid the groundwork for the Dark Souls series, further strengthening From Software's reputation for creating challenging and rewarding action RPGs. The series gained immense popularity and brought mainstream success to the studio. After the success of Dark Souls, Miyazaki was promoted to the position of company president in 2014, which in Japan was exceedingly rare for someone to reach that position within 10 years of joining a company. However, before Miyazaki's rise to power, there was a slight shuffle of things, as Dark Souls 2 was greenlit and pushed into production, while Miyazaki was still in the process of developing Dark Souls' DLC. Because of this, Miyazaki was unable to return as director, and instead acted as a supervisor, while director Tomohiro Shibuya helmed the project, the first and only time this has happened in a Soulsborne game. Miyazaki would later state, regarding not directing the project, is partially due to the development of the Artorias of the Abyss edition and Dark Souls 2 going on at the same time. I was kind of removed from the Dark Souls 2 project, and then I began to work on Bloodborne. Officially beginning development in 2011, only a few months after the release of Dark Souls, issues began to rise almost immediately. Shibuya wanted to make things bigger and better. Bigger world, better graphics, bigger bosses, better story, everything cranked up to 11 that would make Dark Souls 2 the ultimate Dark Souls experience. However, as development progressed, technical issues emerged, prompting the team to create an entirely new engine to achieve a higher quality. Unfortunately, as we've seen time and time again on this channel, this decision led to more problems rather than solutions. The pursuit of excellence in various aspects of the game resulted in a series of setbacks during the early stages of development. Despite these problems, Shibuya still kept his grandiose vision of Dark Souls 2. The story he envisioned contained many elements of time travel and explored themes of the human struggle through the cyclical nature of the Dark Souls world. The player would be able to time travel between 2 points in time with the assistance of the Pendulum of Time, and in order to use that, we would have to gather the Dragon's Jewel, a rare gem found in the womb of a dragon that lived from time immemorial, combined with a drop of time, water from an inexhaustible spring in an underground cave that exists in a hole in space and time. Going from the past to the present, we'd interact with a child version of the Emerald Herald, as well as some other familiar faces. The overall world would also be far more snowy and mountainous, kind of like what we saw in the Crown of the Ivory King DLC. Other than a heavy emphasis on the time travel feature, we really don't know much about what Shibuya's original vision of Dark Souls 2 was, as midway through development, he would leave the project over creative differences, leaving the role to director Yue Tanimura, with only 1 year left in development. After the departure of director Tomohiro Shibuya, Yue Tanimura took over the troubled development of Dark Souls 2. Facing significant issues, Tanimura made the decision to restart everything. Tanimura acknowledged the challenges, describing the development as quite troubling, and mentioned that they were forced to rethink the entire game midway through its development. Tanimura would say, "This game went through quite a troubled development process. Due to a number of factors, we were actually forced to rethink the entire game midway into development. We really had to go back to the drawing board and think once more about what a Dark Souls game should be." He would continue by stating, "We had to decide what to do with the designs and maps that had been created up to that point. Ideally, we'd start from scratch, but of course we were under time constraints, so instead we had to figure out how to repurpose the designs in our newly reimagined game." So essentially, they had to keep what was already made and rewrite everything. The same characters and world assets that were made under Shibuya's vision, now with an entirely different context under Tanimura's. Despite the challenges, the development pressed forward. The team worked to reshape Dark Souls 2 into a cohesive and playable experience. The story was completely redesigned, with only time travel playing a minor factor in the overall story, as it's implied that the character goes back in time during the start of the game, and then later when fighting the Giant Lord. The story then took on a role more similar to the original Dark Souls, by continuing the cycle of the curse of the undead. In the final version of Dark Souls 2, players take on the role of an undead known as the Bearer of the Curse, seeking a cure in the land of Drangleic. The redesigned story incorporated familiar Dark Souls themes, such as, again, the cyclical nature of the world and the challenges of breaking free from the curse. The Bearer of the Curse, like the chosen undead, would embark on a journey to obtain 3 powerful souls and confront formidable foes to find a way to end the curse and seek the purpose in the overall narrative. While the developmental hurdles forced significant changes, the team's effort resulted in a fairly cohesive narrative that, while different from Shibuya's original vision, maintained the essence of the Dark Souls universe. Despite having to rework everything, the Dark Souls 2 team came together and published a completed game on March 11, 2014. Despite some fans critiquing the poor world design, bad enemy placement, and lackluster bosses, Dark Souls 2 still did very well, with the game receiving a 91 on Metacritic, selling over 1 million copies in its first week, and winning the 2014 Golden Joystick Awards Game of the Year. Despite all the accolades, fans were just not vibing with the game, and neither were the developers. In early 2015, From Software released an enhanced and updated version of Dark Souls 2 titled Dark Souls 2: Scholar of the First Sin. This edition aimed to address some of the criticisms and concerns raised by fans and critics regarding the original release. Scholar of the First Sin included several improvements and additions, such as DLC inclusions. This new edition bundled all 3 DLC expansions: Crown of the Sunken King, Crown of the Old Iron King, and Crown of the Ivory King, while also providing players with additional content and extending the overall gameplay experience. Visual and performance upgrades. The visuals underwent a remaster with advanced lighting effects, enhancing the overall graphics quality. The game's resolution was also increased to 1080p, contributing to a sharper and more detailed visual experience. Scholar of the First Sin also targeted performance issues, achieving a smoother experience by running at 60 FPS. Enemy behavior and placement. One of the more notable changes was the revision and redistribution of enemy behaviors and placements throughout the game. This adjustment aimed to provide a fresh challenge for returning players and contribute to a more balanced and fair experience overall. While Scholar of the First Sin did not completely eliminate all the issues raised by the fanbase, it was still generally well received in its efforts to address and improve upon the shortcomings of the original Dark Souls 2. All in all, Dark Souls 2 is a very interesting game. On one hand, it is critically acclaimed for the usual Dark Souls stuff, like its challenging gameplay, atmospheric world, and intricate level design. On the other hand, Dark Souls 2 faced criticism for its terrible development, changes in directors, and the initial departure from certain established elements of the series. The level design alterations, enemy placement, and deviation from the original formula garnered mixed reactions. And while yes, the release of Dark Souls 2: Scholar of the First Sin aimed to address some of these criticisms, providing an update and more polished version of the game, it didn't necessarily fix everything. While it may not be universally hailed as the pinnacle of the Souls series, Dark Souls 2 remains a crucial installment in the franchise, influencing subsequent titles and contributing to the overall legacy of From Software's beautifully challenging action RPG series.